When you look at the top 5 graded players here in this game, Trey Hendrickson's at the very top of the list for the Cincinnati Bengals with a 95.9. Yes, you heard me right, folks. 95.9. It's going to be one of the highest single game grades that we have this season. Tight end Mike Gesicki got 2 gritties in yesterday, 2 touchdowns, 90.5. Don't laugh, Seth. It actually happened. This is football. Cornerback Mike Hilton and 89.9. Can we bet on that? Is that a DraftKings prop?
I don't know, but
Can we get over/under gritties from Mike Gesicki?
He was a week late to National Tight End Day, though.
That's true. That's true.
Well, but because he's not really a tight end, that's why.
Oh, well, positional. I mean, they tell us he's a tight end.
They do tell us
the roster does tell us he's a tight end. Edge rusher Sam Hubbard, number 4 on this list with a 75.2. Defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins with a 71.7. Joe Burrow in this game. Joe Burrow's having a hell of a season, man. It's such a shame that they started out as slow as they did. 91.0 in this game. On the other side of things for the Raiders, Jackson Powers-Johnson, the rookie center, got in on the action with a 90.6 overall grade this week. Guard Jordan Meredith with an 81.5. Cornerback Jack Jones had a pick 6 in this one, 76.2. Cornerback Jacorian Bennett with a 76.2 as well. And then edge rusher Caleb Von Chason with a 75.3 at number 5 here on this list. Gardner Minshew a 67.1 overall grade. Dalton, what is the stat that told the story here, my friend?
I thought especially early in this game, the Bengals did a great – this was one of the few games this year, maybe the only one, where I've seen the Bengals offense actually have some layers to it, right? And Chase Brown, I thought using him, again, without T. Higgins, and their offense has been pretty stagnant when they're missing Higgins or Chase or both. I thought Chase Brown and just kind of getting the engine going and getting positive yards in the run game and even using him as a receiver a little bit, I thought was the biggest factor in the Bengals having this kind of offensive day against a defense who really, look, they play with a lot of effort and there's a lot of days where they're really good. It just set up, you could see the run game was just a little bit better against a shorthanded Raiders defensive line. Using Chase Brown and even other guys in the short game to get yards after the catch. I just thought the Bengals did a better job, starting with Brown, of setting up the rest of their offense and then creating explosives later in the game. I thought it was just a much better, more layered game plan by Zach Taylor, but credit to them because it felt like, you know, there was just too many times, we've seen it for years now, where the Bengals look one-dimensional, right? Especially now that they've lost Joe Mixon. This was a game where Chase Brown, 32 touches, 157 yards, got a receiving touchdown. Was he the highest graded player on the team? No, but it was enough to give them at least the semblance of balance, especially early in the game, where they could now run some layers on their offense. You could see at times that, okay, later in the game, their play action actually started working because guys started stepping up. Usually the Bengals, when they run play action, it's just for show. Nobody feels like it's a threat. In this game, they established Brown early. They felt like everything in their playbook was a threat, and that's why they had such a big day on offense.
I was just really impressed with the Bengals offense over. Actually, I should just say the Bengals stars. The 2 guys that really need to show up for this team every single week, one's Joe Burrow, one's Trey Hendrickson. They were elite in this game. They were fantastic. And I don't think we have to spend a ton of time on this because the Raiders are bad, the Bengals are good. I know people are kind of look at the Bengals record and maybe say that they're not, but they are a good football team. And what I did really like about this performance from the Cincinnati Bengals is how Joe Burrow played without T. Higgins, right? Because how many times throughout the season have we said, well, it's different. When you don't have Higgins, when you don't have Chase, it's just different when both those guys aren't out there. Well, didn't have T. Higgins in this game. Didn't have Jermaine Burton either, which I'll get to in a second. Joe Burrow, 27 for 29, 251 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns, 89.7 passing grade, 2 big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays, an elite 90.7 passing grade this season, second only to Lamar Jackson. He has 14 big-time throws, he is 14th in the NFL in big-time throw rate, and he's first in turnover-worthy play rate. And I mean that as a good thing, not that he has the highest turnover-worthy play rate. He has the lowest for starting quarterbacks in the NFL. So Joe Burrow is playing as well as any quarterback in the NFL. It's just sort of a shame that the Bengals got off to as slow a start as they did. Well, it's a shame depending on, I guess, who you are a fan of. If you're a Bengals fan, it's a shame. If you're a fan of basically any other team, you're happy about it because you don't want to have to deal with the Cincinnati Bengals once they get into the postseason. My most impressive in this one is Trey Hendrickson, though. Hendrickson, he's first in the NFL in sacks with 11. He's third in the NFL in pressures with 46. He's third in the NFL in pass win percentage at 23.5. I mean, he is just unbelievable. Had 4 sacks in this game. He was unblockable, it felt like. And so these are the 2 stars. Like, these are the performances that you need from your 2 guys. And when that happens, you see what happens for the Bengals, especially when you pair it with what you said with Chase Brown. So this is a really good football team when things are rolling. And it feels like, what did Joe Burrow say last week? Hey, we got to win 7 of our next 9. It's doable. It's not impossible, whatever he said. He's right. They basically got to play this brand of football with T. Higgins when he comes back, if that's going to be the case. But I guess they're where they need to be.
So I developed this metric out of thin air recently.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
I
was hoping you were going to say over the last 5 seconds.
The best source of anything is thin air.
Yeah.
Every
Hey, that's how we got the internet. Be careful.
series of tubes.
Okay.
No, so it's called. I call it funneling outcomes. Okay, and so I started by thinking about this with the Bengals a few weeks ago, and when they were playing really bad on defense, and so what was happening early in the season was, we know who their best player is. You just talked about him. It's Trey Hendrickson, true elite one-on-one pass rusher. Except what was happening was the coverage was so bad. They couldn't stay tight to routes. They were allowing easy throws early in the progression. So they were not funneling enough outcomes to their best player, edge rusher Trey Hendrickson. All of a sudden, and it's basically started in the Giants game. And now, you said it before, the Giants aren't a good offense. The Raiders aren't a good offense. So they have played some easier quote-unquote offenses. We'll see this Thursday night again against the Ravens, which they allowed a lot of points to the last time they played them. They were not funneling a lot of outcomes to their best player on the field. Now, when you stay tighter to routes, when you're able to get the quarterback off his first read, all of a sudden, your best player on your team can make a difference. That's exactly what's happened now with Trey Hendrickson and this Bengals defense. They're a little bit better in the secondary, in coverage-wise, and now the pass rush, Sheldon Rankins as well, can get to the quarterback.
I mean, I think it's a good – I mean, I sort of parallel this theory to how the Lions were using Aiden Hutchinson, and I don't have anything off the top of my head to how they married coverage to allow Aiden Hutchinson to play well. But I did point out at the beginning of the season how the Lions, everything they did in the front seven, particularly the front four along the defensive line with the guys with their hand in the dirt, was to get Hutchinson with one-on-one opportunities where there was no chance for help, really. And the way that they set it up is if they had a 4-down line, Hutchinson was almost in this like wide 7. Even if there wasn't a tight end there, he was wider than the outside shoulder from the tackle. The closest interior defensive lineman was lined up on the inside shoulder of the guard. So the guard couldn't kick out to help an inside move against Hutchinson against the offensive tackle. And if Hutchinson gets off the ball really well, then he can beat you to the outside. But so that to me, what you said is setting up your best defensive player to have that sort of success. Another example, I feel like there's a reason why Rashawn Gary got so quiet at the beginning parts of this year, because when you go look at last year, they were setting him up on that defensive line to succeed. And it felt like they weren't doing that this year. It felt like Jeff Hafley kind of came in and he was like, all right, well, we're going to sort of align the defensive ends just at 5 technique positions, and we're going to have a shade nose, we're going to have a 3 technique, and it's basically just going to be, okay, win your ones. It's not, okay, we're setting it up so Gary gets as much advantage as possible because he's our best player. So I like this theory that you're working on here, because I do think that it's valuable, especially for defensive line play.
And I think another piece of it, this is something I see on the college side with a team like Michigan, who's got maybe the best front 4 in the country and a secondary that's not as good as last year, where the answer, if you're facing a great pass rush but a suspect team in coverage, is, well, just get rid of the football, right? Because you're talking about, okay, if the quarterback is getting rid of the ball in 2.2, 2.3, it really doesn't matter what your pass rush is. You're going to have to cover on the outside anyway. If you can stall it a little longer, then you talk about kind of creating an effect on an opponent's time to throw, where you go, okay, now if I have 2.6, 2.7 to work with because my coverage is holding up, that gives Trey a lot more time, right? Because usually that cutoff sits around 2.5. If you can stall quarterbacks a little bit, certain guys, it's funny because certain guys you want to speed up and blitz them and make them get rid of it before they want. And certain other guys where you need them to hold the ball, right? You don't want them getting out, like you mentioned, of that first read. So I'd be curious in that metric and that sort of thing, how much like an average time to throw plays into that. Because I think that's a big factor when you talk about that's the way to beat a team with a great pass rush and awful coverage. It's just get rid of the football. Fine, just put it in space and see what happens.
The not to derail this grade release show too much, but the Hutchinson thing reminds me a lot of how the Cowboys did play under Dan Quinn, and probably would have loved to have played a little bit more under Zimmer when they had the 2 pass rushers. But so the Lions play a lot of man coverage, they play a lot of press man coverage. So you're saying, hey, We're going to get these one-on-ones like you talked about with our best player, that's Aiden Hutchinson, and we're going to eliminate quick throws, which is what you're saying, by playing press man-to-man, and we're going to run across the field with them. Now, you look at the Cowboys, especially when they're not able to get pressure, and this is true even when DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons were playing. There's teams, the Saints this year, the Packers last year in the playoffs, were able to kind of mitigate that pass rush a bit. Now, all of a sudden, we can throw the ball wherever we want, right? It remains to be seen if that will end up happening to the Lions. Obviously, they played well last night against a really good passing offense in Green Bay. So we'll see if they can continue doing that without Hutchinson. I think that's a big storyline going forward for the playoffs. But yeah, they're funneling outcomes. People write this down. They're funneling outcomes.
They're going to steal it.
They're going to steal my bullshit metric.
It's working. We've got evidence.
Thin Air treated you pretty good, I think.
Yeah, you did good there. My most disappointing is Jermaine Burton. Jermaine Burton should have been active for this game. Should have been wide receiver 2. And instead, he is a healthy scratch yet again. And, I mean, there were reports for him this week about, hey, you know, like he was getting the team to trust him more. You know, like he was going to be out there. He wanted to be a part of the game plan. He was all in. He was invested. And then I had read a report that he had missed a walkthrough on Saturday. And so now he's not even dressing for the game. And this is a really talented wide receiver where, again, it's a bummer because in theory, if you have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Jermaine Burton as your 1, 2, 3, I saw Eric All towards ACL, which sucks. But, I mean, if you would have added in Mike Gesicki and then Eric All to that mix, and then you've got Zach Moss and Chase Brown, who you're really happy with in the backfield, that is a awesome offense. You are basically the offensive line having an average day away from 30 points every single week. But without Jermaine Burton, you know, you've got the injury to T. Higgins, and it's something where you've now got to supplement a lot of that production elsewhere. So to me, it's just very disappointing that he cannot get on the field. Who's your most disappointing before we move on?
Just the Raiders. Tough day for the Raiders linebackers. Robert Spillane, Divine Diablo, usually better than this, along with Max Crosby, kind of can be the heart and soul of that defense at times. But it was a tough day for him. I would look for him to bounce back, but it was really rough over the middle in the run game, in the passing game, especially for Spillane. It was a tough one. It just all the way around for the Raiders defense, obviously, but those two guys specifically.